Welcome to the next module, Animal Biodiversity in the Arctic, Part 2. Mainly, we will be looking at CBMP and SAMBR reports. So, what is CBMP and SAMBR? The Circumpolar Biodiversity Monitoring Program, or CBMP, is the biodiversity monitoring program of the conservation of Arctic flora and fauna. The biodiversity work group of the Arctic Council. The State of the Arctic Marine Biodiversity Report, or SAMBR, is typically produced by the Arctic Council through its Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program, that is AMAP, or in collaboration with other organizations. The various areas covered in the SAMBR report include marine biodiversity overview, trends and drivers of change, climate change impact, conservation and management, human dimensions, data gaps and future direction. So what these two reports are mainly talking is what is the biodiversity change that is happening in the Arctic, and we will be looking at some statistical information and the data related to the changes happening in the Arctic biodiversity. So this will help us understand what is the problems faced by the Arctic species and how we can mitigate or we can help reduce these kind of problems. So here is the organizational structure of a CAFF board. So the CAFF board has various CBMP coordination committee and a technical team. So each one is taking care of terrestrial. There is one particular group takes care of terrestrial ecosystem, another one takes care of freshwater, coastal and the marine. So these are all the four major areas or major ecosystems which exist in the Arctic, and people study about that. So there are four different groups and they look after what are the changes happening in that particular ecosystem. So the terrestrial steering group comprises of vegetation expert, avian expert, invertebrate expert and mammal expert network groups. And in the case of freshwater steering group, national expert networks are actually present. Similarly, for the CBMP coastal steering network, this is currently under development. And for the marine steering group, the sea ice biota expert, plankton expert, benthos expert, fish expert, seabirds expert and marine mammal experts are there. So that each subspecies in that particular marine ecosystem is being monitored by expert groups. So they make the report, and based on the report, they also talk about the policy decisions for policy makers. So here are the entire flow chart describing what are all the activities that is being carried out. The first one is the science, indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, experiments and existing network are being studied or analyzed. So from this, they identified FECs, that is focal ecosystem components, to monitor and report. So what they do is they observe something, and based on that they will try to understand whether there is any major change which affects the Arctic animal population, animal biodiversity. Then they start monitoring it. So that is how the things are getting expanded from earlier days to current studies. They identify key monitoring and report targets. They ask user needs and questions, and they continued implementation of the sampling methods, scale to use, description of FECs, implementation plan, all those things are carried out. Then they go for the data collection and analysis. Once the data is collected and analyzed, they report that or communicate to the rest of the world. So how do they do all these things? They generate new knowledge based on the SABR key findings. Then they advise for future monitoring. They identify some key parameters and they say, okay, we have to keep monitoring this particular thing from the next cycle onwards. And then what are all the lessons learned through that observation. And then they make lots of conferences and workshops and discuss the experts. And then finally they come to a conclusion and they make the communication, or they announce their reports. And they also come out with the new hypotheses and new technologies to monitor. So here is the circumpolar Arctic vegetation map. So this map clearly explains what are all the areas that are covered for the Arctic biodiversity program. So the one is called the The geographic boundaries are given here. The light pink color is basically the subarctic region, and the red line what you see is the CAFF boundary, and these remaining areas are divided into 5 subzones. So the geographic boundaries and ecosystems are made so that people can study what are the changes happening at a particular region or the area. So the State of the Arctic Terrestrial Biodiversity Report START has these subzones. So here the assessment and cover high Arctic, that is subzones A to Z, and low Arctic subzone D and E. So these regions are consistent with the circumpolar Arctic vegetation map, so that what are all the different plants are there, because many of these animals also eat plant. So by knowing the regions, people can easily study a particular species. So what are the key findings of this Arctic Terrestrial Biodiversity Program? The climate change is the overwhelming driver of changes in the terrestrial Arctic ecosystem, causing diverse, unpredictable and significant impact that are expected to intensify or increase. Changing frequency, intensity and timing of the extreme and unusual weather events due to climate change are affecting some species with unknown effect on populations. Species from southern ecosystems are moving into the Arctic and are expected to push Arctic species northward, create an Arctic squeeze. This is what we have seen earlier. So what is the squeeze? Basically, moving the species northward is called the Arctic squeeze. And it change species interactions. Changes in culturally important food resources have implications on the food security and culture of indigenous people and Arctic residents. So if marine ecosystem does not have enough fish, that means the people who hunt and live on fish as a food will be affected. So mainly the Arctic indigenous communities are affected because of the low population of fish in the nearby areas for them to hunt. Let us look at the limitations of the Arctic Biodiversity Report. Although some trends have been observed, natural variability in Arctic terrestrial environment and large information gaps make it difficult to assess and summarize global trends for Arctic terrestrial biodiversity. And what are the recommendations given by this report? The range and complexity of drivers affecting Arctic terrestrial biodiversity signals the need for comprehensive integrated ecosystem-based monitoring programs coupled with targeted research projects to help decipher causal patterns of change. Here is the status and trends of Arctic terrestrial mammalian carnivores. So here is the legend given here. The red color means those are highly endangered or critically endangered species, and the dark orange color is basically the endangered species. The yellow colors are basically vulnerable or threatened species. The light green colors are new threats are coming to these kind of species. The green one is not having much of a threat, and the ash color and the white color one are not known because we do not currently know what are the changes that is happening in these kind of populations. So here if you look at the various regions, Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland and Russia, which are the Arctic countries. So here in the Canada we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 regions are there. So in all these regions what happens is there is a change in the population, or these species are surviving okay. There is nothing much to worry except for the brown bear population. So the brown bear population is actually decreasing, and wolverine also is actually decreasing. Other than that, rest of the species, the grey wolf, coyote, American black bear, Canadian lynx, ermine, least weasel and American river otter. So all these species which exist in Canada are surviving without much of a problem. But the grey wolf in the Norway, Sweden and Finland is in the highly endangered species currently. Similarly, the Arctic fox is also in the endangered, critically endangered species currently. Wolverine also, especially in the Finland, it is in the highly endangered level, whereas in Norway and Sweden, the wolverine population is in the endangered level. They are not critically endangered, but they are still endangered. But for many of the other species, especially in the case of Russia, there is less information available, so most of the areas are grey in color. So this is how we know. These are reports from the ABA report, which talks about the status and trends of Arctic terrestrial mammalian carnivores for several years. And these are all the various regions. Marine mammals are present in the 12 regions as shown here: Bering Sea, Chukchi Sea, East Siberian Sea, Barefooted Sea, Arctic Archipelago, Baffin Bay, Hudson Bay, Davis Strait, East Greenland, Barnett Sea, Laptev and Kara Sea. So these are all the various regions. 12 regions are there where people monitor the marine population in this Arctic region.